As a seasoned semi-truck driver, I've traveled thousands of miles through the loneliest stretches of highway, but nothing could have prepared me for that one fateful night when the road turned into a nightmare. I was hauling a load of goods across a desolate stretch of highway in the dead of night. The moon was a pale sliver in the ink-black sky, and the only company I had was the rhythmic hum of the engine. The occasional flicker of my headlights was the only reminder that I was still connected to the world outside my cab. The radio crackled with static, and I sighed as I tried to find a clear station, anything to break the monotony of the night. Just when I was about to give up, a faint voice came through the speaker. "Breaker 19, this is Ghost Rider, you copy?" I chuckled to myself. Must be some trucker trying to have some fun on this lonely stretch of road. "Ghost Rider, this is Night Hauler, what's on your mind?" The voice on the other end sounded eerily calm. "Night Hauler, you better keep your eyes on the road and your foot on the gas. There's something out here. Something that ain't right." I rolled my eyes, assuming it was just another trucker's tall tale to pass the time. "What are you talking about, Ghost Rider? You trying to spook me?" But then I saw it, a shadowy figure darting across the road ahead. I slammed on the brakes, sending my cargo crashing forward. The truck screeched to a halt, and I clutched the steering wheel, heart pounding. "What the hell was that?" I muttered to myself. The voice on the radio crackled to life again. "You saw it, didn't you? I told you, Night Hauler, there's something out here, something that don't belong in this world." I didn't waste another moment. I shifted into reverse and floored the gas pedal, getting as far away from that spot as I could. As I drove on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a chill settled deep in my bones. Miles passed, and I convinced myself it had just been a trick of the night. Maybe a deer, or a hitchhiker, or even my own exhaustion playing tricks on me. But just when I thought I was safe, the radio crackled back to life. "Night Hauler, this is Ghost Rider. You might want to keep an eye out for the woman in white." I frowned, glancing at my rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me but the endless ribbon of road and darkness. "Ghost Rider, you're starting to creep me out. What woman in white are you talking about?" The voice on the other end was tense. "The legend goes, she appears to truckers in the dead of night, luring them to their doom. They say she's a lost soul, searching for something she can never find." I was about to dismiss the story as pure superstition when I saw her. A figure in a flowing white dress standing by the side of the road, illuminated by the dim glow of my taillights. Panic surged through me as I realized I had seen her before, in that fleeting moment when I slammed on the brakes. I pushed the accelerator to the floor, my heart racing. But no matter how fast I drove, the woman in white remained just behind me, her eyes fixed on my rearview mirror. Her face was pale and gaunt, and her eyes were hollow as if she had been wandering the night for an eternity. I picked up the radio. "Ghost Rider, she's behind me. What do I do?" The voice on the other end was urgent. "Night Hauler, you've got to keep driving. Don't stop for anything. She'll try to make you stop, but you can't let her." I clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The woman in white was getting closer, her ghostly figure almost within arm's reach. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her words over the roar of the engine. I could feel her desperation, her longing for something just out of reach. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let her trap me in her haunting web. I drove through the night, the woman in white always just behind me, her presence a constant haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked on the road. Hours turned into eternity, and I was running on fumes, my vision blurred with exhaustion. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the woman in white vanished. I blinked, my heart still racing, and realized I was alone on the road once more. I pulled over at the next rest stop, my hands trembling as I lit a cigarette to calm my nerves. I picked up the radio, hoping to hear Ghost Rider's voice, but there was nothing but static. As I continued my journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something otherworldly that night. The road had turned into a realm of nightmares, and the woman in white was a memory that would haunt me for the rest of my days. From that night on, I never drove alone on those dark highways. I kept the radio on, hoping to hear Ghost Rider's voice once more, to warn other truckers of the woman in white and the terror that lurked on the night drive. The road may stretch on forever, but some journeys are better left alone. I had always enjoyed the solitude of long night drives. The hum of the engine, the endless ribbon of road stretching before me, it all felt strangely comforting. But that one fateful night, as I embarked on a drive through a remote stretch of countryside, my love for solitary journeys took a sinister turn. I was alone as usual, my headlights slicing through the inky darkness. The moon was shrouded behind a thick blanket of clouds, and the only sound was the rhythmic thumping of rain on the windshield. A disconcerting sense of isolation settled over me, even though I had always prided myself on my self-sufficiency. As I navigated the winding road, the dense forest on either side seemed to press in on me, casting eerie, elongated shadows that danced menacingly in the periphery of my vision. My hands clenched the steering wheel, and I forced myself to keep my gaze fixed on the road ahead. That's when I saw it, a figure, soaked to the bone, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat, and the tires screeched in protest. The figure was a silhouette, an indistinct shape that seemed to waver in the downpour. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. The figure remained still, as if frozen in time. My headlights illuminated a pale, gaunt face, the eyes hollow and lifeless. Fear coursed through me as I realized the person standing before me was no longer among the living. Panic set in, and I threw the gear into reverse, desperate to put distance between me and whatever had just crossed my path. But as I backed up, I saw more figures emerging from the forest, all of them drenched and deathly still. I couldn't make sense of it. Were they lost hikers, victims of some terrible accident, or something far more sinister? The air in the cab grew heavy, and I felt a presence, an unseen force that seemed to envelop the truck. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and called 911, explaining the bizarre situation. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, but as the minutes ticked by, the unease inside me grew stronger. The rain drummed relentlessly on the roof of the car, drowning out all other sounds. I was about to hang up and try to drive past the eerie figures when the dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. "Stay in your vehicle," she urged, her tone urgent. "Lock the doors and do not approach the figures. Officers are on their way." I followed her instructions, my heart pounding. I watched as the figures drew closer, their lifeless eyes locked onto mine. They moved with an unsettling slowness, their movements almost mechanical, as if they were following some unseen command. As they closed in, I could see the water dripping from their clothes, the mud clinging to their shoes. Their faces were pale, their expressions blank. They looked like lost souls, trapped between worlds, and a shiver ran down my spine. I was about to hang up and try to drive past the eerie figures when the dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. "Stay in your vehicle," she urged, her tone urgent. "Lock the doors and do not approach the figures. Officers are on their way." I followed her instructions, my heart pounding. I watched as the figures drew closer, their lifeless eyes locked onto mine. They moved with an unsettling slowness, their movements almost mechanical, as if they were following some unseen command. As they closed in, I could see the water dripping from their clothes, the mud clinging to their shoes. Their faces were pale, their expressions blank. They looked like lost souls, trapped between worlds, and a shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the wailing of sirens. Red and blue lights pierced the darkness as a fleet of police cars descended upon the scene. Officers armed with flashlights and weapons spilled out, surrounding the eerie figures. My relief was short-lived, however, as I watched the officers struggle to detain the figures. It was as if they were trying to grasp smoke. Their hands passed right through the figures, and they continued their relentless advance. One of the officers, a veteran with years of experience, approached my truck and told me to stay put. His eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. "We've never seen anything like this," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pouring rain. The standoff between the officers and the figures continued for what felt like an eternity. It was a battle between the living and the dead, a surreal and nightmarish scene that defied all logic. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the figures dissolved into mist, disappearing into the forest. The officers were left bewildered, their radios crackling with frantic chatter. They searched the area, but there was no sign of the figures. It was as if they had never been there. I was questioned for hours by the police, but I had no answers to offer. The incident left me shaken and haunted. The memory of those lifeless eyes burned into my mind. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something otherworldly that night. The remote stretch of road remains a place of unease in my memory, a reminder that the darkness can hold secrets beyond our understanding. The figures may have vanished, but the horror of that night still lingers, a chilling reminder that the road less traveled can lead to unimaginable horrors. As the clock struck midnight, I found myself standing on a desolate street corner, my phone in hand, summoning an Uber. I had been working late at the office, and the cold November rain had intensified into a torrential downpour. The prospect of a warm, dry car seemed like the only thing between me and a miserable journey home. The car arrived promptly, and I climbed into the back seat, grateful for the respite from the relentless rain. The driver, a man in his late 40s with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low, greeted me with a curt nod. "Where to?" he asked in a deep, raspy voice. I gave him my address and we pulled away from the curb. The city was eerily quiet, the rain drumming on the roof of the car like a sinister lullaby. I settled into the seat, my exhaustion weighing on me like a heavy blanket. As we navigated through the winding streets, I couldn't help but notice that something about the driver seemed off. His gaze in the rearview mirror was intense, his eyes fixed on me, studying me with a strange, almost predatory curiosity. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then, he spoke. "You ever wonder what happens to people when they disappear without a trace?" The question caught me off guard, and I glanced at him, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately, instead taking a long, deliberate pause. "You know, people go missing all the time, vanish into thin air without a trace. No one ever knows what happened to them." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, my mind racing. This was not the kind of conversation I expected from an Uber driver. I think it's best not to dwell on those things. The driver turned onto a narrow, dimly lit street that I didn't recognize. Panic crept in and I fumbled with my phone, ready to call for help if needed. He continued speaking, his voice now a low, sinister whisper. "But what if I told you that some people don't really vanish? They just change." I couldn't suppress a shiver as I felt his eyes on me once more. "Change how?" The driver grinned, and it was a grin that sent a chill down my spine. "In ways you can't even imagine. They become something otherworldly." I felt a surge of fear, my mind racing through the possibilities. Should I jump out of the car? But we were moving too fast, and the rain-soaked streets were slick with danger. Desperation set in as I looked around, trying to get my bearings. That's when I realized we were nowhere near my neighborhood. The street signs were unfamiliar, the buildings shrouded in darkness. "Where are we going?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The driver's grin widened, revealing teeth that seemed unnaturally sharp. "Somewhere special." My heart hammered in my chest as I contemplated my options. The streets were empty, and we were heading deeper into the unknown. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind, and I knew I had to do something, and fast. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, praying that someone would answer. But as I brought the phone to my ear, all I heard was a deafening, static-filled silence. I tried again, but it was as if the world had fallen silent, leaving me alone with the sinister driver. The car suddenly came to a halt in the middle of a pitch-black forest. The rain had intensified, drumming on the roof like a malevolent symphony. I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The driver turned to me, his eyes glinting with a malevolent light. "Don't worry, you won't vanish. You'll become part of something greater." As he spoke, his form began to shift and contort, his body morphing into a grotesque, otherworldly shape. Tentacles sprouted from his face, and his hands elongated into nightmarish claws. I screamed, my mind consumed by terror as I watched the driver transform into a monstrous entity. With a swift, unnatural movement, he lunged at me, his claws outstretched. But just as his grotesque form was about to envelop me, a blinding light pierced through the darkness. A car's headlights cut through the rain-soaked night, and a screech of tires filled the air. The monstrous driver recoiled, letting out an otherworldly shriek of pain. He writhed in agony as the headlights bore down on him, revealing his grotesque form in all its horrifying detail. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, it was over. The driver was gone, leaving only the empty seat and the lingering stench of sulfur in the air. The driver who had come to my rescue, a good Samaritan passing by, helped me out of the car and called the police. They arrived within minutes, taking my statement and searching for any trace of the terrifying entity that had tried to abduct me. But there was nothing. No sign of the monstrous driver, no evidence of the nightmarish encounter. It was as if he had never existed. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. I don't know if it was a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, or if I truly encountered something supernatural. But one thing is certain, I will never look at an Uber ride the same way again. The darkness hides secrets that defy explanation, and some encounters are best left in the realm of nightmares. Thanks for watching. Don't miss out on more spine-chilling tales. Subscribe now for weekly scares. Hit that red button and join our journey into the unknown.